What is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch Fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we are hopping into a 8-team full PPR mock draft, drafting from the second overall position. Today's format will be one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, one flex spot, kicker and defense, and 5 bench spots. If you guys are looking for any other formats, be sure to check out all of our videos on the channel, as well as all of our live streams. You guys just might find the exact format you are looking for and or draft position. I will have a video out for every draft position for 8 teams, 10 teams, and 12 team formats before the month ends. So be sure you guys take a look. If you guys have any specific mock draft requests, drop them down below. I will try my best to get it included in on the schedule before the season starts. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on the way in. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure to hit the like. And most importantly, any other comments, questions, concerns you guys have pertaining to the upcoming fantasy season, let me know down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Without further ado, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop into today's mock draft. All right, so like I said, for the purpose of today's video, we're drafting from the 1.2. Kind of a difficult spot to draft from. You can either start with going hero running back, whether you prefer Christian McCaffrey or Bijan right here, or you're going to take a stud wide receiver and go Jamar Chase. So I do think it's a little bit of a difficult decision, but for the purpose of today's video, let's go hero running back. Let's take Christian McCaffrey. He's going to give you tremendous positional advantage at the position on a weekly basis. And I love Jamar Chase right there. I don't mind starting your draft with Chase as well. But I just think ultimately what this is going to allow us to do is get some really good value at the 2.7 and at the 3.2 when it comes to the wide receiver position. There's going to be less value at the running back position at that turn. At the same time, you can still get pretty good value at the running back position there. So ultimately, whether you start with a running back or wide receiver, I still think you'll be okay. You start with running back, I think you go wide receiver at the 2.7 and the 3.2, unless like Mahomes makes it to that point or Jalen Hurts. You just can't pass up that positional advantage. At quarterback, if you start with a wide receiver like Jamar Chase at the 1.2, for some reason JJ's there, then you're probably smashing the draft button over a running back. But let's say you start with Chase at the 1.2. At that point, you just take the best available running back at the 2.7. Maybe Tony Pollard falls out. I'm fine with him as our RB1. If you're lucky, I don't think Saquon will make it there, but maybe it does. Derrick Henry might be there. Whoever it's going to be, you take them. Then you go with the best available wide receiver at 3.2, whether that's Devonta Smith or Calvin Ridley, whoever it's going to be. But for us, in this specific build, we're going to go with the best available wide receivers at the 2.7 and 3.2. So right now, there are a lot of good wide receivers on the board. They're starting to thin out here. There goes A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Stephon Diggs. I will say, looking at how things are going, we might be in position to go ahead and take one of those elite quarterbacks, which I do think is really important to do in these 18 formats if you can. But let's take our wide receiver 1 and Garrett Wilson. And I kind of go back and forth sometimes because you're going to see really good quarterbacks fall a little bit later in these 8-team drafts, and you can go ahead and secure just absolute stud players like here at the 3.2. We could get Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. There's some really, really good available players, but ultimately, I think when he falls to you, you draft Patrick Mahomes, okay? You draft Josh Allen, you draft Jalen Hurts. If you're in a position where they're not going to make it back to you, you have to take that risk because that positional advantage on a weekly basis at the quarterback position is unquestioned in 8-team formats. So a lot of scenarios right there. Calvin Ridley's off the board. I don't mind him. I don't really prefer a second running back at the 3.2 since we're kind of going hero running back, but man, Tony Pollard's really hard for me to pass up there, and JT and Jacobs had their argument as well. If they weren't in the situations that they're in at the time I'm recording this, then they'd be smashed, drafts anyways. So nonetheless, this is how we started things out. I think this is fine. We're going to hold off at running back for a bit. I still think there's a lot of really good later round running backs we're going to be able to stack up on. And ultimately, when we look at things right now, we're going hero running back. We have the positional advantage as long as C-Mac is healthy at our RB1 spot. We have positional advantage at quarterback. We're going to try and gain more positional advantage at wide receiver. Ultimately, we're going to sacrifice it at running back 2 and the tight end position. But right now, there is only one tight end off the board. There goes Mark Andrews. He's really the only other player that I'm like kind of quote unquote maybe reaching for or selecting at their ADP when it comes to the tight end position. Everyone else, I'll just hold off. Dallas Goedert falls late in a lot of these 8-team formats, and so does Evan Ingram and Pat Fryermuth. And I think they're just fine if you don't get one of those top tier guys. And for me, that's Kelsey or Andrew. So ultimately, at the 4.7, 5.2, we are taking the best available wide receivers. Okay. So for me, looking at the board, I mean, T. Higgins is available, Debo's available, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, all kinds of names. There are still some good running backs, including Jahmyr Gibbs, who's really tempting, but we went hero running back for a reason. So it's just tough because sometimes in these 8-team formats, the drafts are so different draft to draft, and just really good value can fall out to you. So you could be your own judgment there. If you feel like the value at a different position outweighs things, I mean, there goes Gibbs, and I'm kind of happy because I was pretty tempted to go Gibbs, but let's just take the best available wide receivers here. If you want to go running back, JT and Jacobs are here, Najee Harris, ETN, there are still names, but I think we just take the best available wide receivers. So let's go ahead and let's take Amari Cooper. I like him a lot as a wide receiver 2. He was your wide receiver 10 last year. I like Debo in this range, but honestly, I think there are names that bring more upside to the table, like DJ Moore, even Drake London and Christian Watson. And I still think Brandon Ayuk might fall back later on. So that's definitely something that I'm keeping an eye on as well. But let's go ahead and take DJ Moore. I mean, he's been a player that I've loved as a flex option essentially all off season long, ever since he got traded to the Bears. So, it might be a little early in an 8-team format, but I think the way this draft has gone, pretty heavy at wide receiver, we need to go in and take who we think are the best available wide receivers. And then at the 6.7, 7.2, obviously we're looking for our RB2 at this point, but also, it might sound crazy, but if you play in a full PPR format, whether you guys are playing in a 1 flex format or a 2 flex format, I say you go out and you get that wide receiver 4 sooner rather than later, because, if the wide receiver in your wide receiver 1 or 2 spot, or who you've drafted for your primary flex player, for us is DJ Moore, gets injured when they're on bye weeks, whatever it may be, in full PPR formats, you want that upside at the wide receiver position at all times, and you want the consistency. So I will go out and draft a wide receiver 4 before an RB3 all day long, because I want to be able to filter and wide receivers that I believe in all year long. So it's a little bit against ADP here, but Christian Kirk is the primary name that I'm eyeing for that that wide receiver 4. And I think when we look at the available running backs, it makes sense to go ahead and secure the wide receiver that we have the most faith in first. So give me Christian Kirk. I don't understand his ADP, depending on who you're drafting with and everything, he can go a lot earlier. I mean, we run a lot of 12-team formats here on the channel, and we've already drafted for some of our community drafts for the season. And Christian Kirk in 12-team formats sometimes goes at the end of the 4th. So if he's there, you can draft him as your wide receiver 4, take him all day long. All right, looking at available running backs, there are a lot of names: Mixon, Jones, Pierce, Sanders. Kind of go with whoever you have the most faith in. I'm going to go Miles Sanders. I like Aaron Jones as well, but if worse comes to worse, A.J. Dillon is a player who falls to kind of those end of the round areas, and I think ultimately he's good as like a RB4, so I don't want to get too saturated into that offense. Miles Sanders as a RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey makes me feel okay. And I did mention this earlier, right? At the quarterback position, we're the first team to take a quarterback off the board. So now we're into the 7th round, right? And Joe Burrow just got selected at the 6.8, but Herbert and T-Law are still on the board. And there's only 2 teams without a quarterback, so they're probably going to take them. But then the question is, how long do they wait? And the thing is, if you're, some leagues, don't get me wrong, some 8-team leagues, people will go out and draft 2 quarterbacks just to take that positional advantage away from other teams and then to secure a top tier quarterback on their bye week. But ultimately, there are 8 quarterbacks in my mind: Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Fields, Jackson, Burrow, T-Law, and Herbert, who bring that kind of top tier level of play to the table and can finish as top 5 quarterbacks this year. So no matter what, you're going to be able to come out of your draft as long as a team doesn't draft 2 quarterbacks before you draft your QB1 with a quarterback in that tier. So if you do want to hold off, I think that's okay. But at the same time, if you're sitting there and you feel like, man, I have the opportunity to draft Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, I just can't pass it up. Don't pass it up because that positional advantage at quarterback is huge in these 18 formats. Okay, moving along. We're looking for our RB3. Call me crazy, but there are some really good wide receivers on the board as well. So I actually prefer DeAndre Swift in this range, and he's gone. The guys that I'm really looking at, Rashad White and David Montgomery, I think they're perfectly fine RB3s and RB4s. But Brandon Ayuk is still on the board, and he's a player for me. You know, essentially 80 receptions last year, of over 1,000 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. I mean, if he just repeats what he did last year as a wide receiver 15 this year, I'll be happy. So I love Ayuk. And now we really don't need to worry about the wide receiver position for some time. In the same tier, I also really like Hollywood Brown and Jahan Dotson, who just went off the board. But there are other good options. I mean, Chris Godwin, Tyler Lockett even, but we're pretty heavy at wide receiver. And you guys might kind of be raising an eyebrow at that, but let's go ahead and take Monty as our RB3 because DeAndre Swift and Rashad White are gone. Now, if we had the ability to draft DeAndre Swift and or Rashad White and then David Montgomery, I probably would have done so. Just went ahead and knocked out our RB3 and RB4, get it over with, and still get really good value at the position. But, you know, looking at this team that is wide receiver heavy, like I said, that might raise an eyebrow for some of you guys. I mean, we're into the 9th round. We don't have an RB4. We don't have a tight end. And we do have 5 wide receivers, a pretty high value name. What does that do for us throughout the season? Well, if you play in a double flex format, this is what you want in full PPR formats. You want 2 wide receivers in those flex spots. But even if you just play in a single flex format in these 8-team formats, now ultimately we have just secured a ton of value at the wide receiver position, which gives us positional advantage at wide receiver all year round. So, like I said towards the beginning of the video, you know, we have the positional advantage at quarterback. We have it at wide receiver. We have it at RB1. We might sacrifice a little bit at RB2. You look across the board, you know, Barkley, Gibbs, Bijan, Ramondre, Eckler, Chubb, Pollard on a team, Henry, Taylor, Jacobs. There are some teams that, you know, as long as all those guys are healthy and playing, yeah, you might sacrifice a little bit of positional advantage against them. But ultimately, I still think compared to a lot of the teams on the board, we're in a pretty good place at the running back position. I mean, Walker, Hall, and Swift is certainly a team that brings a ton of upside to the table as well. So, looking at the 10.7, I mean, we really just want to go ahead and get our RB4 and then wrapping around to 11.2, we can go ahead and get our tight end 1. And then after that, we'll just finish out with the best available wide receiver or running back, then go kicker and defense. So I think we're actually in a very good spot at this point in the draft. So for me, for your RB4, I mean, Dobbins, Cam Akers, AJ Dillon, James Cook, Javonte Williams, Gibson. There are all kinds of names right here. And I think you just kind of pick whoever you have the most faith in. And, you know, the team in front of us already has a tight end, so I think we go ahead and we go running back. And so for me, just pick whoever you like best here. I'll take a little bit of risk. Let's go J.K. Dobbins. I mean, coming off of, you know, the kind of injury history and everything, he still makes me a little bit nervous, but, you know, ultimately he's tied to an offense that should be much more efficient under, you know, new offensive coordinator Todd Monken. Lamar Action Jackson is back. Dobbins should get plenty of chances to score, but I do really like Cam Akers there as well. Okay, let's go ahead and take our tight end. Evan Engram, Pat Fryermuth, David Njoku. Pick whoever you like best. I think Engram brings more upside to the table, but there are ultimately more pass catchers in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense in my mind, even with Pickens and Deontay Johnson there with Pittsburgh. But I don't know. I just feel like Fryermuth is going to be a little bit more consistent and might not bring the same amount of upside to the table, but he just always is a consistent tight end. And even in these 8-team formats, I still love him. He was your tight end 8 last year. You know, Compare that to Ingram. He was your tight end 5, but a lot of Ingram's value came towards the end of the season. I still really like Ingram, but just pick whatever tight end you think is best there, and that goes ahead and fills up that spot. Then looking at this final flex spot, if Antonio Gibson or Brian Robinson make it out to us, maybe we go ahead and take them. I mean, Zach Charbonnet, Devon Shane, who's dealing with a shoulder injury now, Jerick McKinnon, Eli Mitchell might make sense since we have C-Mac, but I think ultimately we just go with the best available wide receiver, get our wide receiver 6, and a lot of redraft builds, 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 4 running backs, and 6 wide receivers is what I prefer. So I'll go ahead and just take who I think is the best available player, whether it's Sky Moore, Cortland Sutton, Romeo Dobbs. Those are kind of the guys in these late ranges that I like the best. And then after that, we'll just draft a kicker and defense and call it a day. I think this draft ultimately went exactly how I wanted it to. Hero running back style. We landed that positional value or positional advantage, I should say, with Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd round. We still have a ton of advantage at the wide receiver position, and I still think we landed good RB2s and a good tight end and Pat Fryermuth. And there goes Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that's the thing, right? If nobody in your league drafts more than 1 quarterback, you can sit back and wait and get Trevor Lawrence in the 12th round sometimes. I mean, that's just crazy. Lawrence easily could finish as a top 5 quarterback this season, and you're getting him at dirt cheap value. So just keep that in mind. But at the same time, I do think there's a little bit of risk associated with that at the end of the day. And sometimes in your real drafts, quarterbacks might go a little bit earlier because people are really trying to lock them up and things like that. So just be careful with it. Romeo Dobbs, Cortland Sutton, Sky Moore. I don't really care who you prefer right here. None of those running backs that we were really crazy about made it back to us, but there are some intriguing names, including Jerick McKinnon, even Jamal Williams, Devon Shane, Samaje Perine. But ultimately, what we're going to do here is pick a kicker and defense and then wrap this up. Let's just go with Daniel Carlson. He's been the kicker 1 the last 2 years in fantasy, and then we'll pick a defense and call it a day. So let's take a look at what we put together here. We got Mahomes at quarterback, Fryermuth at tight end. We'd be starting C-Mac, and I mean, that RB2 spot can really filter around. Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins, any of those guys could act as your RB2. We'd be starting Garrett Wilson, starting Amari Cooper, flexing DJ Moore or Christian Kirk for that matter. If you're playing a double flex, this is why I like these types of strategies, because you guys are in a double flex format. This is a perfect build for a double flex format because then we're flexing DJ Moore and Christian Kirk. Brandon Ayuk's on the bench. We still have a wide receiver who had over 1,000 receiving yards, finished in the top 15 last year, so we're still great in terms of our bench depth. Sky Moore gives us some upside, and we have, like I said, 2 other running backs we can rely on in that RB2 spot. So positional advantage at quarterback, positional advantage at the RB1 spot, positional advantage all over the place at wide receiver and flex spots. Our RB2 spot is good enough. It'll get us through. You can rotate those guys, and Sanders and Monty and Dobbins all have top 12 upside at the position at the end of the day. And we got a top 8 tight end from last year who I think brings a lot of consistency to the table. We've got the kicker 1 from the last 2 years. I mean, guys, don't reach on kickers or defenses, but when that value is there, make sure you're taking it. And I mean, I'm eyeing the Patriots defense with this final selection. They were your defense number 1 last year, and we land them. So this was a great draft. This is exactly what I want from a hero running back build. You guys can see why I decided to go running back over Jamar Chase right there. And ultimately, I think it led to a great team. So be sure to let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of today's mock draft. Like I said, guys, check out all the other mocks on the channel. I'm trying to get a video out from every draft position from an 8-team, 10-team, and 12-team format before the season begins. I have a ton of mocks already out, and we live stream nearly almost every single night here on the channel. You guys can come out to our mocks, ask me any fantasy questions that you guys have on live, and request any mock drafts. If you guys have any mock draft requests, drop them down below. I'll try and get them on the schedule, as long as you guys are subscribed to the channel, which if you're not, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit the like if you found today's video helpful, enjoyable, whatever. And any other comments, questions, concerns you guys have pertaining to the upcoming fantasy season, let me know down below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. With that, I will say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.